The event was originally meant to be a celebration of hip-hop's influence on music. It was supposed to be a televised panel, a few performances, and the usual scripted tributes. But when Eminem and 50 Cent stepped onto the stage, it quickly became clear that something was off. They weren't there to perform, nor were they there to celebrate. Instead, they were there to tear down the system, exposing its flaws in real time. Eminem took his place at the front of the stage, standing behind the microphone with a piece of paper in his hand. His expression was unreadable, but his posture spoke volumes. This wasn't about nostalgia, nor was it about self-promotion. This moment was about exposing the biggest lie in the music industry, live, with millions watching. Standing slightly behind him, 50 Cent crossed his arms and scanned the crowd. Though he wasn't speaking yet, his expression was clear. He knew exactly what was coming, and he was letting Eminem take the first shot. Then, Eminem slapped the paper against the mic stand, letting it hang there for the cameras to capture. "This," he said, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the audience, "is a list of every artist who should have won, and every artist who won instead." 50 Cent chuckled, shaking his head. "Man, this's been happening for years," he muttered. The audience shifted uncomfortably, some of them already aware of where this was headed, while others were caught off guard. The host, seated on the side of the stage, appeared frozen. This was supposed to be a safe, industry-approved discussion, but what was happening was something entirely different. Eminem lifted the paper again, scanning the list. "They want to talk about hip-hop's legacy? Fine. Let's talk about how they've ignored it for decades. Let's talk about the biggest names in the game getting passed over on purpose." The crowd went silent. 50 Cent stepped forward. "You ever notice how some people keep winning over and over again, while the real ones never get their moment? It's like some people learned how to play the game, and the rest of us, well, they pretend we don't exist." Behind the scenes, producers were scrambling. The teleprompter had nothing for this. But it was too late, the truth was already out. The stage lights burned bright, but the temperature in the room dropped. The energy had shifted. Nobody was clapping, nobody was laughing. The air grew thick with something different, unease, realization, maybe even fear. Eminem leaned forward, making sure the cameras captured the list of names he held. He didn't need to explain it, the names on that paper spoke for themselves. Legends who were missing from the Grammy history, artists who should have been there but never were. Then, in a calm and steady voice, an anger that had been building for years, waiting for the right moment, Eminem spoke again. "They've been doing this for decades. They lied to us all. They use us when they need us. They put us on stage, let us perform, let us sell out arenas. But when it comes to the actual respect, when it's time to hand out awards that actually matter," he glanced at 50 Cent, then back at the audience. "They act like we don't exist." The atmosphere shifted again. Some leaned forward, while others exchanged glances, all knowing exactly what Eminem was alluding to. But nobody had ever put it into words quite like this. He took a deep breath before dropping the first bombshell. DMX had the biggest rap albums of the year. Twice. You know how many Grammys he got for it? 0. 50 Cent let out a quiet laugh, shaking his head. "Say that again, man, 'cause I don't think they heard you." Eminem didn't blink. DMX had the biggest rap albums of the year 2 years in a row. No Grammys. Not even a nomination for Album of the Year. Murmurs spread across the audience, some people already knew this, while others were hearing it for the first time. But now, no one could ignore it. Eminem flipped to another name on the list. Nas, one of the greatest lyricists of all time, didn't win a single Grammy for nearly 30 years. He paused, then moved to another. Snoop Dogg, 0 Grammys. Tupac, 0 Grammys. A sharp inhale rippled through the crowd. "So don't sit here and tell me this ain't rigged," he said. 50 Cent stepped forward, his eyes scanning the crowd. "See, the problem is they pretend like they respect us," he began. "They'll let us headline, let us perform, let us carry their whole damn show. But when the trophies come out, they find a way to give it to somebody else. Eminem nodded in agreement, his gaze unwavering. The host, still seated off to the side, looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Eminem tightened his grip on the mic. This isn't about me. It never was. This is about all the people they did this to before us, and all the ones they're still doing it to now. Silence fell over the room, and the weight of his words finally sank in. 50 Cent stepped forward, adjusting the mic, his eyes scanning the room. Some people shifted uncomfortably, while others leaned in, waiting for what came next. He let out a low chuckle. "You remember 2004?" he asked. A few murmurs rippled through the audience, everyone knew where this was going. "I do," 50 Cent continued, shaking his head. "That was the year I lost Best New Artist to Evanescence." The room tensed. It wasn't just that 50 Cent lost, but who he lost to. He had one of the biggest debut albums of all time, Get Rich or Die Trying, a cultural shift that changed the sound of hip-hop forever. And yet, when it came time to recognize that, they handed the award to a rock band. "I knew right then this whole thing is rigged," 50 Cent said, his voice steady with frustration. Eminem nodded, arms crossed, letting 50 take the floor. "Now look," 50 Cent continued, "I ain't got nothing against Evanescence, but let's be real, y'all ever seen a new artist blow up the way?" He let the question hang in the air, the weight of it undeniable. "I did that," 50 Cent continued. "That year, my album went multi-platinum. My singles were everywhere, my music videos were in non-stop rotation, but somehow, someway, they made sure I didn't win." He glanced back at Eminem. "Sound familiar?" Eminem smirked in response, acknowledging the shared experience. The crowd was completely silent now, the weight of their words sinking in. Some nodded in agreement, while others, particularly artists in the back, looked down at their feet. But that was just the beginning. "You know what really showed me how fake this whole thing is?" 50 Cent asked. "My album, the same album that ran the whole year, lost Best Rap Album to Speakerboxxx The Love Below." He paused for effect. "Now, I respect Outkast, but let's be real, do you all think that album was really bigger than mine?" A few gasps rippled through the room. A couple of heads shook in disbelief, but nobody wanted to answer the question out loud. Eminem stepped in, his voice cutting through the tension. "See, this is what they do when hip-hop dominates. They change the rules. When they can't ignore us, they find someone else to give it to." 50 Cent nodded in agreement. "Exactly. They'll let us sell records, let us break records, let us run the game, but when it's time to give credit, they turn their heads." He took a deep breath, gripping the mic, and the craziest part is, it ain't just us. It's still happening. The audience didn't quite know how to react. Some people nodded in agreement, while others just sat frozen, unsure of where this conversation was heading. But one thing was clear, this conversation wasn't stopping, it was only just beginning. Eminem adjusted his grip on the paper he was holding, flipping it over. On the front, it listed the biggest snubs in Grammy history, the names of those who should have won but didn't. On the back, however, was a different kind of list, the names of the people who always won. He held it up for the cameras, letting the moment sink in. "And here's the other side of it," he said. "The names of the people who figured out how to play the game." The room shifted. A few in the audience leaned back in their chairs, while others leaned forward, fully engaged. Eminem's voice remained steady, cold. "This isn't just about talent," he continued. "It's about who the industry picks. Who they decide gets to win. And if you don't play by their rules." 50 Cent jumped in, finishing the thought. "You get nothing." Eminem nodded. "Nothing." At this point, the host, who had completely given up on controlling the conversation, tried to interject. "But the Grammys have honored hip-hop, haven't they? I mean, look at..." Eminem cut him off, shaking his head. "They haven't." He pointed to the back of the paper again. "They give a few trophies to the same people over and over again. And they do it so they can say, 'See, we support hip-hop,'" 50 Cent said with a smirk, but then he paused, his tone turning serious. And what happens when someone comes along that they don't like? Someone who doesn't fit the image they want? Eminem flipped back to the front of the page, his finger pointing to the snub list. "They bury you," he said flatly. The audience wasn't breathing now. This wasn't just a rant anymore, it was a full-on breakdown of the entire system. Eminem continued, "They let a few through. They hand out just enough awards to keep people quiet, but if you don't fit what they want, if you're not playing the game the way they like." 50 Cent chuckled, shaking his head. "You're done." A few heads in the audience turned toward each other, and some artists could be seen clearly identifying with what was being said. Then, 50 Cent let out a sharp laugh. "And don't even get me started on who they give Grammys to before actual hip-hop legends." Eminem smirked. "Oh, we're getting to that." At that moment, the industry knew this wasn't just a speech, it was a reckoning. Eminem let the silence linger for a moment, the audience now visibly uncomfortable, shifting in their seats, whispering, and wondering how far this conversation was going to go. Then he went there. "And some people," Eminem said, lifting the paper again, "they figured out how to play the game perfectly." 50 Cent took a step forward, smirking. "Oh yeah, some people cracked the code." The crowd tensed, fully aware of where this was headed. Eminem exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "Look at Jay-Z." A few gasps could be heard. No one said a word. "Look at Beyoncé." More whispers spread through the room. It was a direct hit. 50 Cent didn't hold back. "Jay, man, you know what I'm saying is true. You learned how to play the game, and they rewarded you for it." Eminem nodded in agreement. "And I get it. You do what you gotta do. But let's be real, you think they ever would have let someone like DMX or Nas win over and over again like that?" The tension in the room became almost unbearable. Then, 50 Cent dropped the real bombshell. "You ever wonder why Blue Ivy got a Grammy before some of the biggest hip-hop artists of all time?" Dead silence. Eminem folded the paper and placed it back on the podium. "That's the game. That's how it works. And everybody in this room knows it." According to reports, Jay-Z and Beyoncé were seen looking visibly stunned when they learned about what had just been said. 50 Cent nodded, looking out at the crowd. "Some of y'all are going to act like you don't see it, but we all know. And after tonight, nobody can pretend anymore." At that moment, the music industry changed. For a few seconds, there was nothing but silence, the audience, the network, the industry itself, nobody knew how to react. The weight of what had just been said hung in the air like an exposed wire. Eminem and 50 Cent hadn't just criticized the Grammys, they had ripped the entire system apart, live in front of millions, and there was no taking it back. Eminem, now leaning slightly against the podium, exhaled. The job was done, he had said everything he needed to say. But before stepping away from the mic, he left one final statement hanging in the air: "We don't need your trophies. We made history without you." Then, he pushed the paper away, letting it fall onto the podium like a discarded contract. 50 Cent chuckled and stepped forward. He took one last look at the audience, then at the cameras, and finally at the people in the room who refused to meet his eyes. "And Jay, man, I ain't mad at you. But I ain't playing this game." With that, they walked off the stage. Within minutes, the footage spread across social media. Fans were divided. Some called Eminem and 50 Cent the realest to ever do it, saying they had finally exposed what people had whispered about for years. Others were less sure. Some felt they went too far, dragging Jay-Z and Beyoncé into it was unnecessary, and they had just burned every bridge in the industry. The Grammys issued a statement within the hour, claiming they had always supported hip-hop and pointing to their previous winners. But it rang hollow because the damage had already been done. According to reports, Jay-Z and Beyoncé were seen looking visibly shocked when they learned about what had been said. Jay-Z, a man who had once boycotted the Grammys himself, now found himself at the center of the very thing he had once fought against. Beyoncé, always poised, reportedly stayed silent. But the real question wasn't about their reaction, it was about what would happen next. One thing was certain now: the music industry trembled after Eminem and 50 Cent grabbed the mic on live TV and exposed the Grammys. So now that the truth was out, the question was, will the industry finally change, or will they just find another way to keep the game rigged?